away at the age of 72. Matt Brown, Extra Points, joins us with Paul Craig. I'm David Smoak on 365 Sports. Matt, thank you for your time. On the EA Sports, the 10,000 or whatever, the opt-in, what is the percentage of that? Do you know? And has there been anybody that you yet know about that has said, I want more money than what they're going to give us?
I do not know of any athlete that has said, I want more money than what they're going to give us. In part because EA is giving more money to a lot of those stars. You have the $600 plus the cost of the game as the base, but EA has contracted with well over 100 college athletes to promote the game on social media. And some of those aren't even college football players. And those marketing ambassador contracts are worth, I've been hearing anywhere from the low thousands up to the low five figures. Potentially more than a player might get for Madden if you're a real superstar. So everyone's been pretty happy. 10,000 athletes, based on the number of athletes that EA has said they want to include, is about 90% of the total. And that is, I will freely admit to this, a much higher number than I expected at this stage. Not because I don't think athletes are happy with that deal. It's because they're 20, and getting anybody to do any kind of paperwork at scale is difficult. So the fact that this many people have opted in, I think, is a sign of the hard work that many, many football operations and campus NIL personnel have done to make sure the athletes get this taken care of.
So would you say that of that, near 90, I guess it's 87 to 90% of those kids that haven't signed up, there's probably a good chunk of them that are just being 20 and not signing up for the thing?
I would say that's almost all of it. We may have a small handful of athletes whose representatives are agitating for more money right now. It's rarely the athletes themselves for this kind of thing. I would encourage everybody, when they're covering NIL or recruiting or anything that college athletes might do, the simplest response is somebody being 20. And I would say that would represent the vast majority of people who haven't opted in yet.
Matt, I think we can all agree that nobody's bigger than the game. I mean, everybody will just move on if there's not a specific player in the game and keep playing their dynasty mode and recruiting anyways. But I did recall reading something a few weeks ago about how they were going to try and prevent, let's say if it was last year or I guess this year, and one of the best players in the country didn't want to play in the game for whatever reason, that they were going to have some sort of preventative measure where you couldn't copy them exactly and create them in the game. Is that true? Is there some sort of thing that they're working around to try and prevent that in case somebody opts out?
Yeah, that is exactly what EA's vice president of EA Sports has said to ESPN. They said that internally. When I have asked their communications and development staffers for, hey, what does that mean in practice? People have not given me more information. And I don't know if part of that is they don't want to spoil it so they can give people a 3-month head start to figure out how to get around the system. That might mean restricting certain names that you can put in, right? Like, you can't name, you often can't edit a player or name a team something profane. If you're going to go play online, that you have blocked out words, they might just, block out names and similar names for anybody that is formally opted out of the game. But we don't know for certain. I know that many people at EA have gone to great lengths to tell me that customization and user-generated content are important aspects to this release. So to any fan, I would say this just isn't worth getting freaked out about right now. Chances are that anybody that opts out is not going to be somebody you really deeply care about anyway.
All right, Matt, you saw and read and heard some of what was going around last week with the college football playoff. They're already basically talking 14, and they still don't even have everything done for 12. But what were your thoughts about the SEC and Big Ten not only getting 3 automatic qualifiers, but getting their conference champions, or at least somebody, a first-round bye, and that's just the deal? I can't imagine the ACC and Big 12, no matter the situation, would accept any of that.
I hate it. I think it is absolute loser behavior. I think it runs contrary to any competitive, ethos for not just college athletics, but any postseason. And I think it does have a good chance of happening. And honestly, to your point here, if you're a coach, this idea is outrageous, right? We would never consent as consumers to the NFL saying, okay, well, if the Dallas Cowboys, win, then they're guaranteed a playoff bye, or whoever wins the NFC North or NFC East is going to be better television ratings than the NFC South. So we're gonna guarantee them some kind of preferential treatment. That would be ridiculous. Everything else, it's just you need to win this number of games and do X, Y, or Z to achieve the postseason. But if you're the Big 12 or the ACC, you might not be negotiating from a position of strength in all of this. If you sign up for this deal, it is a way to guarantee that you're going to get a second team into the college football playoff. And if we look at the last 5 years or so and the current lineup of who's in the Big 12 and who's in the ACC, there's definitely going to be years where you wouldn't get one. The ACC last year, I think, would be a good example. Under a guaranteed system, that means we're getting a 3-loss Louisville team in there. You might be getting the last year's Oklahoma State, team in there, and under a pure at-large system, that's unlikely to happen. I hate it because it just cements this idea that, well, many of us suspect before the season, and then it just becomes very crystal clear that college football is not a meritocracy, and there are limits to how you can play your way into anything, and that some people who made the right friends 150 years ago are going to have built-in advantages. I absolutely hate it. I hate the amount of, and I'm trying to think of the right word here, of how much the Big Ten and the SEC are trying to throw their collective weight around, not just in these college football playoff conversations, but within how the distribution and composition of the NCAA basketball tournaments works, how automatic bids to other NCAA postseason events work, how the settlement of House v. NCAA works. It's coming from these two leagues, and I think that's mostly to the detriment of college sports as a whole.
Yeah, Matt, the other thing is when it comes to basketball championship history, especially recently, neither of those two conferences has a big leg to stand on when it comes to the last time that the Big Ten or SEC won in basketball, with Kentucky 12 years ago. So you're not talking about the same kind of run they've had in football at all. And it's the fact that they're trying to throw it around. When are people going to notice it, that there's a whole chunk of the country that's going to be completely not invested in this because the powers that be told them that we're not interested in you at all?
Yeah, I mean, so basketball is a slightly different situation here, but you're absolutely right? The Big Ten, a current Big Ten team, hasn't won the NCAA men's basketball tournament while they're in the Big Ten since 2001, 2002, right? With Michigan State.
Yep.
Dudes who are on that team have already retired from the NBA. It's ancient history, right? And even in the college football playoffs, multiple teams from the ACC have won, more than the Big Ten guys. So for this, it is explicitly about money. And the Big 12 to a lesser extent is involved in these kind of conversations here too. And the thinking is, if we are these 4 major leagues, 3 major leagues, however you want to slice it up, if we are the ones that are named defendants in House v. NCAA, if we are the ones that are going to be primarily responsible for paying out this gigantic antitrust settlement that's going to cost our individual schools $8, $9, $10 million a year, potentially more, then we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we are generating as much revenue as possible to make to be able to continue our standard of athletic programs despite having to pay this gigantic settlement. And their argument, and it might not be wrong, even if it's odious, is this idea that, everyone in America loves St. Peter's and everyone in America loves the first round upset. And that's what makes gives the NCAA men's tournament some magic. But they don't tune in when those teams are in the Sweet 16. And what they want are gigantic, big blue blood brands that they've heard of duking it out in the Final Four. And if that means we have to kind of, put our thumbs on the scale a little bit to go kick the NEC out or the MAAC out or the Big South or some of the other, bottom 5 leagues, so we can get 11 Big 12 teams in, so we can get 11 ACC teams in, or some 18-win Ohio State team in the tournament, they're going to do that. And we can all complain about it, and I think it would make the tournament itself worse. But that broadly speaking, is the direction things are going here. And if it turns out to make everybody less money in 10 years, nobody who made that decision will be held accountable for it.
Matt, it's the offseason, so realignment's always going to be popular, but especially with what's going on in the ACC and the last couple of years and all of the playoff setup and everything. What kind of reverberations, because I know you don't just cover the biggest schools per se, but what kind of reverberations are you kind of picking up as far as top on down, how some of these decisions or lack thereof are affecting some of the smaller schools as well?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually, and I hope to be able to have something about this reported out this week. Obviously, there's going to be realignment, fallout in the event that Florida State reaches some kind of settlement or leaves the ACC, or if North Carolina and Miami and Virginia and some of those other schools leave the ACC. But there's also conversations happening at the lower levels that are independent of what's happening at the P5, P4, P2 level. Part of that is as school leagues try to figure out how they can realign to both save money on expenses and also potentially optimize their net ratings for multiple postseason events. It might be how they can add numbers in case they lose somebody for future realignment, so they're not going to be in a position to get picked over. It might be school leagues trying to pick up the last couple of FBS independents, like we just saw with UMass joining the MAC. I know that they had been engaged with conversations with Conference USA for several weeks. I'll have some information soon that kind of explains why they made that decision. But if you're a realignment nut, I would say that beyond the ACC, I would encourage you to keep an eye out on the mid-major ranks out west, particularly within the WCC, the Big West, the WAC, looking for developments there, and also potentially the Northeast. So there's always a lot of different things kind of all happening at the same time.
Matt, if the Big 12 and ACC don't like what they have been told, or how legitimate this will ever be to go up and try to make it happen where they have the automatic qualifiers, but the SEC and the Big 10 want even more, plus more money and money, what can they do? Can they draw a line in the sand and say, go ahead and try it and see what happens?
It's a great question. And I wish I had a better answer. I assume at some point there is some proverbial red line where they'll be forced to do that. But part of the concern, right, is, hey, what happens if these two leagues decide they just don't want to be a part of the college football playoff anymore, which they don't have to be. And if they theoretically decided to leave, again, as odious as fans or people in this market might think of that, those two leagues now control what, 16 of the 20 biggest college football brands? 15 of the biggest 20 college football brands? Would a national championship that didn't involve any of those leagues be seen as legitimate? I don't think it would. I think then you would be looking back at kind of the split pole era where you had the Bowl Alliance, right? And you had the Big Ten and the Pac-12 kind of doing their own thing and not participating, and it didn't always lead to a completely legitimate championship. You can't have any kind of baseball postseason event without the SEC. You can't have any kind of hockey postseason event without the Big Ten, or a lacrosse postseason event without the Big Ten. So it would really jeopardize postseasons across the board. And that's a really difficult position that leadership in the Big 12 and the ACC are on now, because, hey, we want to work together on some things, like what we're doing with Congress and what we're trying to advocate here for settlement of these lawsuits. But we also recognize that that they're not in a position of strength when it comes to figuring out how to distribute revenue or access for the college football playoff. And this isn't the kind of thing where I think Americans can riot in the streets to make sure that the Big Ten doesn't get a third automatic bid. Right? We're not Spain. We're not England. I don't know what the mechanism is to slow this stuff down.
I've always said, and we all have kind of said this, no matter how many blue bloods, alphas, number of national titles those two bigger conferences have, would it be considered legitimately by the country as a national championship if there were just 32 teams involved, or 40 teams, or whatever that number might be?
I mean, probably if it's within the Big Ten and the SEC, if a Florida State or a Baylor or a Houston or depending on how the caliber of brand outside of that group has an excellent season. One of the kind of frustrating things, right, is the epicenter of college sports media tend to be in the SEC or the Big Ten footprint. Like, how many grads of those institutions are leading voices? If ESPN and or Fox are the principal broadcasters of that breakaway tournament, do you think they're going to delegitimize it? Of course not. And then you have Chicago, you have New York, you have Atlanta, you have Charlotte, essentially you have Nashville, you have these everywhere essentially but Dallas, and I guess with the Texas and Texas A&M, that's still going to be SEC territory in a lot of ways. It's going to be hard to get around the megaphone that this isn't a legitimate tournament. Some people are not going to see it that way, and it will be messy, but it's hard to go against the behemoth. And that's, in many ways, even if they haven't completely earned it on the field, which I would argue in the case of Big Ten football, even as a son of the Big Ten here myself, it's hard to go against that kind of behemoth.
Matt, continued luck with what you're doing, Extra Points and the newsletter and much more at Matt Brown EP on Twitter. A great guest for us whenever we're available, whenever he's available to be a part of the show. Appreciate his take on EA Sports, which, of course, is a monstrous deal, and then also where college football is on the tug of war, the turf war, when it comes eventually to the National College Football Playoff.